this trial was a Mickey Mouse deal to begin with. You have a books and records violation that they claim because he didn't categorize the payments that he made to his attorney as payments ultimately for Stormy Daniels, and therefore it was a books and records violation, which is a misdemeanor. And then they decided to pair that with a federal charge, which they don't have any jurisdiction over, and say that it was a campaign violation because they were trying to affect the outcome of an election. And therefore they turned a misdemeanor of a books and record violation into a felony and charged him with all the payments. That's effectively what happened. And it's a joke. I mean, this is, by definition, it's his own books and records. It's his own money.
As you may have heard, we've pressed record. So are you sitting comfortably, Hal? Are you happy if we get chatting?
Sure.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me start, Hal. First of all, are you surprised by the fact that Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 counts?
No, it's not surprising. I mean, as soon as I heard there was a verdict, I knew it was guilty because there was no way they were going to have 12 jurors find him not guilty. So the only possible chance was for one potential juror to make it a hung jury. So as soon as I heard there was a verdict, I knew then it was guilty. The 34 counts are because there were, that many payments made during that time. So it's a lot of overlapping, quite frankly. So it sounds a lot, graver than it actually is. And this trial was a Mickey Mouse deal to begin with. You have a books and records violation that they claim because he didn't categorize the payments that he made to his attorney as payments ultimately for Stormy Daniels, and therefore it was a books and records violation, which is a misdemeanor. And then they decided to pair that with a federal charge, which they don't have any jurisdiction over, and say that it was a campaign violation because they were trying to affect the outcome of an election. And therefore they turned a misdemeanor of a books and record violation into a felony and charged him with all the payments. That's effectively what happened. And it's a joke. I mean, this is, by definition, it's his own books and records. It's his own money. Let's say he'd categorized it differently somehow in his books and records. It's still not public, so that doesn't affect the outcome of an election. I mean, it's insane. And again, they didn't even talk about the campaign finance side of it because that's a federal side, so that wasn't even part of the trial. And the judge gave instructions to the jury that were, outrageous, and it was so one-sided. You take a 90% Democrat area and you put biased judges and biased prosecutors, and it's really diminished the entire judicial system in the United States.
I suppose it's interesting to hear you say all of that, Hal. You're somebody who worked within the Republican Party with Senator Cruz on the inaugural committee at that time for Donald J. Trump as well. Does this change in any way how you feel about Donald Trump as a person?
No, not at all. And in fact, you may have covered it, but this all happened more kind of in the evening on the UK side. But as soon as this verdict was announced, literally the servers crashed the Trump campaign because there were so many people trying to contribute money to his campaign around the country. So people are very upset about this on the Republican side, and independents and everybody else view this as a sham. And it's something that's quite frankly, damaging. And if they can do this to a former president and a billionaire in a state like New York, they can do that to anybody in New York. They could do it.
Well, that's exactly the point, though, isn't it, Hal? That this is justice, that nobody is above the law. This is due process in action. That's what we've witnessed.
No, you haven't witnessed that. I mean, when you get a biased jury pool and a biased judge and a biased prosecution, how is that justice?
Do you know the jurors?
Yeah, they were all Upper East Side Democrats.
How do you know that?
Yeah, of course. You can. They answered questionnaires. It's pretty easy to determine what their political views are.
Okay, because well, the notes that I saw on the jurors were simply man and their age and their occupation.
Yep. Well, take a look a little deeper and you'll see that there were other aspects that were part of that questionnaire.
Okay. And so is that just the way that justice works across the US in that case? Is there a chance that in another state it would have been a Republican jury?
Well, I mean, that's where we're headed, isn't it? I mean, should a DA in a Republican county in a Republican state decide to charge, Biden with a crime and go after him when he's out of office? I mean,
Mm.
that's what we're witnessing here is a biased judicial system. It's really unfortunate, and it's one of those things that it's really difficult to come back from, because once you go down that path, you end up with both sides trying to do it, and that's what you have in banana republics around the world, where as soon as a political leader's out of office, they try to put him in jail, and a lot of times do put him in jail.
Would this Trump trial, the process, the verdict, would it have had more or less integrity and credibility in your view, Hal, had the jury, again in your view, been a Republican leaning jury?
Well, sure, it would have given more credibility to it. Certainly. I mean, you can't, it's a political, this whole thing is political, right? I mean, we can't deny that. You have the Republican nominee for president on trial by a DA who actively opposed him and ran, saying he was going to get Trump. And so you have that in the mix. I mean, you can't escape the political side of this. So therefore, you can't say that it wasn't political. And then when you have a jury that in a city in an area of the city that's 95% Democrat, how can you possibly, which is the opposing political party, how can you possibly get a fair trial?
Mm. There's so much to consider with all of this, the implications of it for Trump. What do you think those are in terms of, and I'm talking electorally,
He'll be the next president of the United States.
right?
Let's go
So
do
then,
it.
does this case? I suppose what does it mean in that case? What is the upshot of all of this? Because I hear your I don't know what the word would be, perhaps frustration or anger that this case was brought in the first place. What, in your view, would be the implications of this? What's the point?
Well, the point is the Democrats are desperate to win this election, and they've done everything they possibly could to go after the president, the former president, and this is the culmination of that. You know, misdemeanor charges that were miraculously turned into felony charges, and to try to say that now we have a convicted felon as the Republican nominee. I mean, that's the purpose. That's what they
You
achieved.
think the upshot will be that he will become president, that this kind of seals the deal?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just intrigued by that because if that is the consequence of this, then is this a complete miscalculation from, the supposed Democrat strategy on all of this?
Absolutely a miscalculation. But they've miscalculated the whole way through. I mean, when you looked at the charges in other states and the other things that were going on, the federal charges, every time they went after him with new charges, his poll numbers went higher. So his poll numbers will go higher after this.
Mm.
I've already seen it with the massive amount of people that want to contribute money now. And I think Joe Biden, at the end of the day, the average American is poorer than they were when he took office, because inflation is higher than real wages. And so you have a population that is upset about that, and there's nothing they can do to change that. And so all they can do is try to discredit the former president. And that's what they're going to try to do between now and November. And I don't believe it will work.
I mean, the whole thing is just fascinating because, for example, Hal, can a convicted felon, which is what Donald Trump is, can he receive a national security briefing if he is the president?
Ah, yeah, I mean,
Can he travel to the UK? I don't know.
it's an interesting. I don't know the answer to that. I would assume the answer is yes, because he doesn't have to go through the normal security clearance process as the elected president of the United States. He's
Yeah.
deemed to have that security clearance. So I would suspect the answer is yes to that. But obviously it's going to be appealed, but it has to go through the state courts of New York for the appeal before it can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. is my understanding, and so that's going to take a long time. But in the meantime, they're going to run around on the Democrat side and claim a victory. But it's going to hurt them. And the sentencing, I mean, just to give you an idea, the sentencing is now scheduled for July 11th,
Mm.
which is right at the beginning of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. So they're going to make Donald Trump be in New York at the beginning of the Republican National Convention.
Yeah. Due process in action. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it, Hal?
Yeah, uh-huh. There's no politics at all in this, is there?
Hal, very good to speak to you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Great to have you on. We'll catch you soon.
All righty.
All the best.